Welcome back. You're still watching Shape Your Life, the show that aims to teach you everything you need to know about health-related matters. At the age of 15, Megan was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis. Life hasn't been easy, but this warrior has dedicated her life to fight the battle against this rare disease. This is her story.
Megan had a normal childhood until the age of 15 years old, when everything changed.
I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis in 2004. I started getting symptoms in October of 2003. It started with my cheeks going numb, and then I was battling to speak and swallow. So we went to my local doctor and he diagnosed me with anorexia. Coming from an all-girls school, it was a common thing, so I think it was just a presumption. And then eventually in the January, I got to a point where I couldn't speak, I couldn't swallow. I was sleeping about 16 hours a day, couldn't walk. My mum was having to help me bath. So we went to a neurologist and she diagnosed me within 10 minutes. And I was admitted into hospital straight away.
She has had to fight myasthenia gravis every single day and has faced challenges along the way.
When I was diagnosed, I tried to go back to school after that, and I attended a whole 7 days and 3 months because of all my hospitalizations and treatment and operations. So we eventually decided to take that year off and just focus on getting me a little bit stronger, able to cope with more. And then I changed schools because I didn't want to go back to school where all my friends were, that they would be the year ahead of me. So I changed schools completely, went to a new town, new city, new friends, which was also terrifying, but it was amazing. It turned out to be the best decision. And I made amazing friends there that were so supportive and so understanding.
Megan can't work a normal 9 to 5 because of a condition.
I've been very blessed that I can work from home, because there's some people that they can't find a job that they can work from home. It's difficult not being able to live a normal life, not being able to go out and be around people the whole time. So I'm lucky that I can work from home and I can rest when I need to, can go and have a little nap for 2 hours and then get back to normality. With regard to depression, I think it's hard not to feel down every now and then and sort of question, why me? But at the same time, you've got to try and see the positive in every day, because otherwise it will just suck you down and destroy you.
Her condition doesn't allow her to plan ahead because she doesn't know when she might relapse. She sometimes spends 4 to 5 days in hospital for plasmapheresis.
With myasthenia gravis, you never know what one day is going to bring compared to the other. So myasthenia gravis affects my muscles. What happens is my body attacks itself and the message between the nerves and the muscles gets blocked. So for example, I'll know that I need to swallow, but my muscles don't respond to that message from the nerves. So sometimes I can't swallow, or I slur my speech, or I can't walk. Sometimes I have to use a walking stick. I can't dress myself some days. Some days my husband has to help bath me. You never know what it's going to bring. There have been times when I haven't been able to breathe properly. I've been ventilated once before because my lungs just didn't want to work. So it's difficult because I don't look sick. I look like a normal person. So when I'm walking with a walking stick, I see people sort of giving me a little bit of a squiff look. But you cope. You cope with what you're given and you make the most of every day.
Megan believes that she wouldn't be this strong if it wasn't for her family's support.
My family is amazing. I don't even have words to describe how fantastic they are. My mum's a single mum. My dad passed away a month before I was born. So it's my brother, my sister, my mum and myself. And my family have kept me going through everything. There have been times when I just want to curl up in a ball and cry, and they keep me motivated. They keep me positive and laughing. And my whole extended family, from my gran to my aunts and uncles and cousins and my husband, they they really keep me going and keep me positive and smiling and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
She is currently working with Rare Disease South Africa, trying to dispel the myths surrounding rare disease and promotes awareness.
For the general public who don't understand invisible diseases or rare diseases, just know that there are so many people who are fighting a battle that you don't necessarily see, that you don't necessarily know about. So don't be too quick to judge. Just understand that people are fighting. People are going through things that you don't see, that you don't understand. So just try and love each other, support one another, and ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking someone and finding out more. I know I appreciate it when someone asks a question rather than gives me a little squiff look.
Rare Diseases South Africa is a registered non-profit organization assisting all patients affected by rare diseases to access life-saving treatment and supportive care for improved quality of life. We spent time with the founder, Kelly Du Plessis, to learn more about the work that they do. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us on Shape Your Life. Please tell me more about the charity.
So Rare Diseases South Africa started really from essential personal need at the diagnosis of my son with a rare condition. And at the time there was no dedicated support in South Africa for rare disease patients. So it was essentially meant to be a support group with the idea that you'd meet frequently, etc. And within the first year we had over 1,000 patients. So it really made us see the need for a bigger organization and a bigger movement really to raising awareness and obviously advocating for rare disease patients. So what was essentially meant to be me ticking a box that I needed has resulted in us being able to tick many boxes for others.
What does the organization do to create awareness and rally support for those that are living with a rare disease?
So we have 3 key objectives. The first one is patient navigation, and that is essentially improving the patient journey from initiation of symptoms. So from the time that they start feeling sick through diagnosis, through getting referrals to correct treatment centres, getting them on treatment, and then essentially towards end-of-life care. So that is the reality for many of our patients. Our second key objective is patient advocacy, and that revolves around policy development and making sure that rare diseases as a treatment group and as a disease group are not left behind in policy development. And then the third is the fun bit, which is the community engagement, and that involves things like family days, getting patients together, participating in sports events. We have a really large rare activist group where we encourage members of the public to use their mobility to benefit others. So it really is, that's the glamorous side of things. That's the pretty side.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the support for the family members who have a family member who's living with a rare disease, what would your advice and input be to them to support this individual that actually has the rare disease?
I think that there's a very important communication method which is called feed in and channel out. And that is essentially putting the patient at the center and not ever divulging your fears and concerns to the patient, but then you go outwards. So it's the patient in the middle, then parents wandering outside of that, and then immediate family members, and then cousins and extended. So you only dump outwards. And I think that that's such an effective communication tool, because I think it's so difficult when you're in it you want to express how you're feeling and your fears and concerns, but it's not really fair to do that towards the patient. So we do a lot of supporting the family members in educating them on how it's appropriate to feel, how to deal with that loss, how to deal with the grief. It is a grieving process. We show them coping mechanisms. We connect them with other families that are going through similar things, and basically just give them a support network to be able to, to cope on a day-to-day basis. And I think the important thing is understanding and getting family members to understand that coping, it just means moving forward. Even if it's the smallest amount of movement, as long as you're moving. And I think it's so important to remind parents to take a moment and appreciate the healthy child, and also try and make time for them. Their entire lives revolve around the sick child normally, or the sick parent, and it makes it really, really difficult for them to identify their own little unique individual personalities.
When dealing with rare diseases in South Africa, are there any that are more prevalent than others? Because I'm sure the list is endless as things, with science discovers new diseases all the time.
Absolutely. So at the moment there's over 7,000 conditions, so thousands. But there are always more common conditions. Some in South Africa would include things like cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, pulmonary hypertension, some of the neurological diseases, Huntington's disease, etc. So there's a lot of more common conditions. There's 350 prominent rare diseases that take up for about 25% of all the diagnoses. So, and then you've got some patients that are like, it's one family line in the entire world that has a mutation that keeps reoccurring. So really, no 2 days are the same with us. We sometimes see such interesting cases. And, really those are the patients that have it the toughest because they don't have previous knowledge to refer back to.
How can we find out more about your charity and how can we support as a public?
So Rare Activists is one way. If you fit, you run, you cycle, you swim, you jump, you whatever, get in touch with us. Let's see how we can use that to benefit our patients. Maybe the next race you do it with someone in mind in particular. Alternatively, our website is a great resource for any possible patients out there that haven't got in touch with us. That's definitely the first place to go. And our website's rarediseases.co.za. And then obviously get in touch with us on social media. Tell us your stories. Yeah. There's no better way to raise awareness than by actually understanding the journey that somebody has had.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story and for the great work you're doing as an amazing organization. And what is the hashtag on social network? I'm new to this whole social media thing and I realize everything's got to be hashtagged.
So we use Aware About Rare and Care for Rare.
Care for rare people. That's what we've got to do. Thank you once again, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
We are joined by Professor Michelle Ramsey from the Sydney Brenner Institute for Molecular Bioscience to get insights on the research that is being done to try to find the causes and treatment for rare diseases. Professor, thank you so much for joining me on Shape Your Life.
Thank you, Ronald. I'm happy to be here.
You are a geneticist. What does that mean?
Yes, indeed. So genetics is all about inheritance. So we want to understand what children inherit from their parents and they from their parents. So we're really interested in diseases that have a genetic basis or an inherited basis.
When we look at rare diseases as a whole, because there's so many out there, over 7,000 I was told, what component of that is directly related to genetics?
So I think many rare diseases do have a genetic basis. And it's really important to find out whether it does or not. Because if a disease has a genetic basis, it often will have an impact on other family members. So it's important to get a diagnosis.
In order to get a diagnosis for a lot of the rare diseases, you and I were speaking earlier about the odyssey, the diagnosis odyssey that many people go through. And it's the reality of the difficulty about finding out what the condition is. Please give me more insight on what that odyssey is and what the solutions are to mitigate the risk of a long duration of diagnosis.
Yes, that's very important for families because I think, one of the most distressing things for a couple when they have a new baby is if they know something's wrong, but they don't know what's wrong. And of course they will first go to their GP and their GP will have a look at the baby and they may make some recommendations, but they may also say that they actually have no idea what's going on. And then what happens is the GP will refer to the pediatrician and the pediatrician may or may not be able to make a diagnosis on the child, but it often goes through multiple different specialists that are seen. And this is why we call it an odyssey, because it's like a journey. So these people are going from doctor to doctor to doctor, trying to figure out what's happening with their child, because of course what they want is the best outcome for their child. So this is very difficult, and often it takes a team or a multidisciplinary team to actually figure out what's going on. But I think for parents, if they can put a name to it, then it's that step forward, because then they can start getting more information and they can start figuring out whether there are other families who have children with similar disorders. So that is really very, very important.
Professor, with the research that you're involved in to help families, identify a lot earlier any particular trait in their genetic makeup, what research do you have your fingers in that could really assist with this mitigation of this long diagnosis odyssey?
As a sort of academic geneticist and somebody who's worked in a diagnostic laboratory, we've been involved with many different disorders. And I think what's so fascinating about working in South Africa is that we have a very unexplored population. So there are not many people worldwide who have investigated inherited traits in black people or colored people. So it's really important for us to do the research and understand the background and the genetic mutations or variants before we can actually offer a service to families. So through my long career, I've been involved with many rare disorders. So I started off working on what we call the hemoglobinopathies. So these are disorders of the blood, and they include alpha thalassemia, beta thalassemia, sickle cell anemia. And we've really done a lot of studies now on African populations, but also Indian and Mediterranean origin populations in South Africa. So then we've also worked on albinism, which is very common in Africa and often poorly understood in terms of the risks that go forward. And I've worked a lot on cystic fibrosis, which is a very devastating inherited condition. And I'm very happy to say that what used to be a diagnostic odyssey 30 years ago is no longer. Wow. Because the clinicians now understand more about the disorder, they refer more quickly, and we can now actually look at the genetic mutation to see what is causing the cystic fibrosis in a particular family. And I think, what's so important for these families is then to know what the recurrence risks are. So if they have a baby with a rare condition, but they now know what the rare condition is and how it's inherited, then they can see a genetic counselor who can explain the risks to them and also tell them something about their options so that they can choose how they want to enlarge their family. Would they want prenatal testing in the next pregnancy, or do they just want to have information? So that's really very important.
Professor, many people are under the assumption that you can not only diagnose, but you could also potentially treat some of these rare diseases if you understand the genetic makeup. Is that true or is that false?
So that's not generally the case. In some cases, that's true. There are some conditions that if you identify what it is and you have the genetic mutation, that you can actually treat very effectively. One of those conditions is something called phenylketonuria. But then there are many other conditions where the best that you can do is figure out what it is, but you can't actually treat it. But I think, it's really important not to put them all in the same bucket, because there's more and more that we can do. So for families, parents with children with rare disorders that have a genetic basis, it is important to continue to search for information or a diagnosis to see whether there is actually something that can be done. And that is why these families really need to see genetic counselors so that they can understand what can be done, what can't be done. So I think hope is an incredibly important thing.
Professor, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you the best of luck with your research and academic work that helps us in the clinical side to really support people that do have questions and do have concerns, so we can help the nation and uplift them even more.
Thank you very much.
Living with a rare disease doesn't only affect the person who has the disease, but also the immediate family and friends. Support is available for everybody. And don't forget, you can keep in touch with us by sending an email to shapeyourlife@ann7.com with all your health-related queries or topics that you would like seeing being discussed on this show. From me, Ronald Apvigi, and the Shape Your Life team, see you next week.